Hey y'all, you're listening to
Two Wives and a Spark.
As an interracial couple, we've learned a lot over the years, and we're committed to sparking conversations that build community and explore how race influences everything. Literally everything. So that's our focus for this podcast.
Because we believe that intentional conversations are vehicles for change. We've seen the power of them in our relationship over the years, and we know that when we really listen to each other and to ourselves, we see the truth in new and revealing ways.
I'm Leah.
And I'm Rachel.
You're listening to Two Wives and a Spark. Hey y'all, we're back again with episode 13. In this episode, we're talking about preparing for parenthood as an interracial couple.
Woo! Yeah, this is a lot. And this is like part one of a two-part series. And in all honesty, this second half of season 2 is so interconnected. So really, part 2 of season 2 is really all about our journey preparing for parenthood and all that that's required and taught us and what we're learning and thinking and all that good stuff.
Yeah, 11 more weeks to go until this life is here with us.
As of today. But it'll be different when
this goes live. That's true, when this goes live. That's a good point. In this particular episode, we're going to be talking about, as we're reflecting with the time we have left before this human being is here with us, we're going to be talking about our values as a family, boundaries, and a topic that I think is a hot topic for a lot of folks listening and folks out in the world right now around the COVID vaccine. So we're going to talk about that as well.
Yeah. What we've learned through COVID, being pregnant, and how our family values have really informed our decisions around all things COVID.
Yeah.
That includes vaccines. So buckle up, y'all. It's going to be an exciting and complex and beautiful, but also unique to us conversation. So we invite your connections, and also, as always, everything that we share here is our experience, and we know that we have blind spots, and we're sharing kind of half-baked and stream of consciousness thoughts. So we look forward to hearing how it lands for you, and we also look forward to hearing how it lands for us, because we never really know what's going to happen. You know,
I think that's a part of the work, though. I think it's important for folks to remember that the work never stops. So you're always in reflection, you're always in thought, and in action, and in back in thought, and in back in action. So I think it's important to just know that if you're ever feeling like, oh, okay, there was no ending though, how y'all going, what? That's the work, right? Like it's just continuous. It continues to go. We continue to grow. We've listened to a few episodes at this point, and we're already like, oh yeah, we could have said this, we could have said that. Right. That's a part of the work.
Yeah.
So
it's such a non-linear path, you know. It's not clean and clear cut. And just like this podcasting journey, life brings us so many surprises and opportunities to be like, oh, okay, this is what the path is going to look like. And then we're like, we get halfway down the path and we're like, actually, no, this is the path that we're supposed to be on, or this is what the path is here to teach us. And so you'll notice that episodes 13 on have a different kind of vibe to them, because we're learning as we go, and we're also taking y'all's feedback to heart. So
it's funny that you say it that way, because that's what people say parenthood is. Like, you can have this plan all you want to, and then you'll be like, actually,
right.
The baby just had a blowout.
And it's funny because we're both such reflective people that this whole season is really us getting ourselves ready for parenthood. And so here we go with this opportunity to really reflect on, like, what have we learned about our family values, and how have we been setting new limits and new boundaries? So what's the first thing you think of when you think of these questions?
Our family values in particular? Mm-hmm. I mean, this is a good question. I think I would definitely, before I even answer, tell our audience to take a second to think about. And, you know, families come in different sizes, shapes, versions. So however you define family. Right now, we're defining it to be myself, Rachel, and our little one that's coming. And of course, Ella.
Ella's our dog.
Ella's our dog.
For those who don't.
And it's not to say that we're not also thinking about extended family, but in this particular moment of our family values, that's what we're thinking about.
Yeah.
And when I think about that, I think the first thing that pops into my mind is this idea of respect, right? Like being mindful of our words, being mindful of our actions towards each other, because we're going to be modeling that and teaching that to a little one. Yeah. And that, I think, is a huge part of what I want our family to feel like is that we're very mindful of how we treat each other, how we show up for each other, so that our little one can learn that.
You know, what's interesting is it makes me think back to our, what was it, 10th episode where we talked about our break and how our values inform that decision too. So as a couple, our values have always informed our decisions, and now they're like on heightened alert. So that respect piece came to my heart deeply when we were going through our break, and when we were like, okay, if we don't have friendship, like the foundation of our friendship was respect. And the foundation of our relationship has always been respect, like really deeply, you know?
Yeah, and I think it's an area that, I'll be honest with the audience, you know, I'm working on. I respect you as a human being. I think the thing that I'm working on in terms of respect in relationship to our family is time, right? Like if I say I'm going to be done with work at this time and get home at this time, then I'm working on that, right? That's not always, time is, you know, it's a construct. But I think within thinking about it in terms of our family, I've been learning, like, I'm trying to build a new muscle, because I don't want our daughter to say, like, well, mommy said, you know, Mata said she was going to be here at this time, but then she didn't come till this time. Like, that's something that I want to be truthful in our household, is like, if we agree to something, or we agree to a schedule or whatever, that we're respecting it. And so that's definitely a work in progress for me as I'm becoming a parent. And I think it's important to just share that, because I don't think it's something that we're already doing and we got down and that's why it's a value. I think it's something, and in our reflection, that we've been talking about and thinking about how things that we want to do better, and not just as an individual, but as we become parents.
Yeah. We actually took some time to reflect on this just recently before this episode, because we wanted to make sure our values are the same that we had as a couple and that we have that we're wanting to build as a family. And yeah, it was a really good conversation about, like, respect is more than just words and actions. It's like also respecting people's space, respecting people's energy. And that time piece is a big one. But it is, I feel like it's going to teach us a lot. And it's also driven how we're making decisions with what we do with our time, too.
Correct. Right. Yeah.
You know? Yeah. So that's definitely one.
What and who we spend time with. To go deeper with this, right? Like, respecting our family unit enough to protect it.
Well, that's
right. Yeah. And that's coming up as we continue this conversation. But I think it's really important to think about that, especially in the day and age we live in, and especially as we're going to be raising a biracial child, right? So, like, respecting who's around her development and around her, I think is really important.
And that, to us, like, that's why respect is so deep. It's so layered, you know, respecting the cultural identities, the cultural backgrounds, racial backgrounds, like experiences, lived experience, all that comes under the umbrella of respect and what we're moving towards. So that's a big one in our family. What other values? We came up with 4 that are our, like, core family values. Do you want to share?
So respect was the first one. We'll share the acronym at the end in case y'all don't catch it. And then I, which stands for integrity, is the second one. And this one, I think we had a really good conversation around this, but just doing what you say you're going to do and following through, knowing what you're saying, and then making a plan to follow through on that, right? Not just saying it because it sounds nice or it would be nice, but truly being reflective and understanding, like, oh, I said I was going to do this thing. Here's how I'm going to do it. Here's where I'm going to need support with doing it. Really having that integrity and carrying that out, regardless of if we're watching each other or checking in on each other or not, so that our child, again, can see that that's a way to live life, right? Is when you say you're going to do something, you put your best foot forward to do it. If you need help, you ask for it. It's a value that I think we want to not just have as a family, but we each individually want to make sure we have, and that we pass on to her.
Right. Integrity is such a big one for us as individuals, as professionals. I think it's one of our corest of values that we talk about the most because of the nature of the work that we do. It's kind of like an umbrella value, because it is, to me, it's like you're embodying all your other values if you're living with integrity. So you're following through, you're being consistent, you're being respectful, you're showing care, you're being honest, you know, all those other values that we have. Integrity holds us accountable to living them in a lot of ways. And I want our daughter to look at us and think, like, okay, yeah, they both said that this was important and they're both following through in their own way, or they're both, you know, living that value consistently. They're not saying one thing over here and doing something else when the other mom's not looking or whatever.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And I think what I think of is like there are some hardships that are going to come the first, few years of being a parent because you're building a new muscle, you're building some new skill sets. Your integrity can easily be questioned when things are hard.
Right.
So being mindful of the things that we're saying now before this humans in our in our actual physical world and space, right? So that we can hold true to those when things are hard.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's the importance of having values is it's your compass in a lot of ways.
Right.
When you can get off track or when things get too challenging or whatever the case may be, which is a part of parenthood.
Yeah.
So I think that's something that we'll continuously be on the lookout for. But as long as we agree to continue to stick to what we said we were going to do and ask for help and push each other and encourage each other and do that in respectful ways, then I think we can continue to live these values.
Yeah. And so much of that, like acknowledging that we are a work in progress and that we're going to fumble and slip and fall sometimes. But I think it's that value, like keeping these values at our core and letting them be our anchor is going to help us make some decisions down the road and help us pause and check each other and support each other,
Yeah. I mean, I think on that note, I think the thing that gets you out of alignment, like when you feel out of alignment, it's most of the time because you're not leaning into one of your values. And if you're not clear what your values are, it's a beautiful moment to be like, I'm out of alignment because I actually value this, but I'm doing this, right? Like it gives you an opportunity to be reflective with yourself, to really take a minute to settle into yourself and think about why you're feeling this misalignment. So it's a good compass, guide, map, whatever word you want to use. All right. Okay. What's our next one, Rachel? You do the next two.
The next two. So the first one's respect. Then we got second, integrity. Third is care. To be caring. So for us, being caring and thoughtful and compassionate is really important. So we break this down as like being caring of our space, which means like mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And that like self-care is a kind of a buzz phrase that people throw around a lot, but we take it really seriously in our family and like what that looks like and what that's going to look like with a newborn. I know it's going to be different. So we really want to lift this up for each other to make sure that we care for each other, that we care for ourselves, that we're caring for our family, that we're caring for our home, and that we're caring for our joy and our happiness, that we're tending to that. Because if we don't, sometimes we might forget,
And again, I think anything that we're naming as a family value is something we want to model for our child, right?
Yeah.
So like teaching her young, how do you take care of yourself? How do you take care of your ideas? How do you take care of your wants and needs? Like modeling for her that taking care of ourselves is really important. Taking care of our family is really important. Taking care of our space is really important, especially because we're going to share in a new way, which I think is going to be really eye-opening and exhausting and overwhelming, but like joyful and fun and all the things as long as we're tending to it.
Yeah. And I think these are going to hold us accountable. Hopefully, they'll like help us be in dialogue with each other in a different way.
All right, what we got next?
Okay, last one, and then we'll turn a corner because like it's important. It was really important for us to identify these. I think we can go along. We could live a lot saying like, yeah, family is a value or like respect is a value. We can make a lot of assumptions about each other. But for us, it was really important to take the time and space to really unpack these with each other. And it really helped us think about like, yeah, of course, these are aspirational. We want to live these. Articulating them with each other and with as a family is going to help us grow, So the last one is honesty. And that's being truthful. For us, it means sharing our needs, even when it's hard. It means speaking up in service of what's right and like what's really happened. I think there's a lot that, you can assume about what it looks like, but we're really looking at like the subtleties of being honest in those little gray areas where it's like, I'm uncomfortable, but should I say it? Should I not? All that is really important.
Yeah, especially as we're both raising a human, right?
Right.
That's the thing I think about parenthood that we'll probably find pretty soon is like we both come from different backgrounds. We both, have different life experiences. Obviously, we're sharing a life right now, but we're both two individuals sharing a life. Now as two individuals, we're about to be sharing a life and raising a life.
Right.
And like building and putting into her ideas and thoughts and love and all these things. And so we have to be honest with each other. Like if one of us does something or says something that the other is like, ooh, is that what we're going to teach our kid? Right.
Right.
Instead of just being quiet about that, right? Like naming, hey, there's a discomfort that's coming up for me.
Yeah.
And maybe I don't know why yet, but being honest about what's coming up for you, I think is important so that we're not out of alignment with what we're teaching this human being.
Especially as an interracial couple. Like,
Yes.
one of the reasons we did this activity is because we are an interracial couple and we don't want to make assumptions about what it looks like. Like, we didn't, that's like kind of the water that we swim in. It's like, yeah, of course, we have to have an explicit conversation about this because our cultural backgrounds are different. And so checking our assumptions is kind of the air that we breathe.
Correct. Yeah.
And so being articulating these, I think, is helpful for all families, but in particular for interracial families, I feel like it's just something that I hope I'm excited to hear and learn more about from other interracial parents and other biracial families and kids, because I think there's a lot to learn.
Yeah, and we're bringing it to you all because I think it's, as we're growing, we want to share the growth we're having and the conversations we're having as we're dealing with growth this season. And of course, we want to know and hear from you, what values are you bringing in your family? What values show up in your family? What values show up for you as individuals, if you're listening to this as an individual? And share that with us, because those are the four that kept coming up in our conversation. And the acronym, if you didn't catch it yet, because we're just so good. This wasn't a complete accident, though.
It really was.
Is RICH, because we're going to be rich with our growth,
That's right. We're so cheesy.
Yep.
Okay. So we say all that. We share that whole context for the values because now we want to talk about what have we learned and how have our values really shaped the decisions that we make, and what have we learned about the limits that are required when we're trying and doing our best to live in alignment with those values. What have we learned these past 6 months being on this pregnancy journey and all that? Yeah, we've had to set some kind of clear lines in the sand, if you will.
And that kind of, I don't want to say happened overnight necessarily, because you become a parent, in my opinion, through our experience, as soon as you learn you're pregnant. We've started making decisions about how we're going to show up for each other, how we're going to show up for our friends, how we're going to show up for this baby. Putting the baby first in our decision making has already started. And that's a blessing for us to be able to even have that state of reflection, that space in our minds to be able to think about this little one already.
Yeah.
When she's not physically in our presence yet, right? But that's a huge part of this conversation, is putting her first. And right now, we just so happen to be pregnant in the middle of a pandemic. And so the way that's been showing up for us, like, we've had to have some hard conversations with family, with friends around like where we're traveling to and where we're not, right? Like, we made a choice, to get vaccinated.
Right.
And then we made a choice to be like, okay, we're going to keep our baby as safe as possible. So anyone that's coming into our home, or any homes we're going into, or any spaces we're going into that's not outside, like, we would like to be around vaccinated people. And those conversations, I think, people's personal decisions, you typically aren't in a non-pandemic moment, right? I have never been in someone else's business to this degree.
Right.
So that's
personal.
New. It's very personal, right?
Yes.
And people have their personal reasons, and I completely understand that.
Yeah.
And our personal reason right now is the safety of our baby. And right now, that means the safety of you as you're holding our baby. And me, like, the decisions I make impact you, and that impacts our baby. So really, again, putting our baby first and having to have some conversations that have been hard. And have shifted family dynamics and friendships, and not necessarily in negative ways. I think in very eye-opening ways on both ends. But I think the baby has allowed us to kind of see how far we'll go into respecting her life, our lives, yada, yada, with what we'll do that maybe we wouldn't have done before. Maybe we would have been too afraid to bring up, or maybe we would have been like, oh, that's not our business, so let's just stay in our lane. Yeah. But now you're like, oh, I got to know, for the safety of my kid, for the safety of my wife, my kid, myself, like, what's going on there. So
let's talk about it. Let's double click on that, because I think we've heard from folks in our community that this is a hot topic that is hard to talk about from the lens of racism and intersectionality. And we've been really thoughtful about history and also who we're talking about when we're having these conversations, because we've had a lot of hard conversations that have like really pushed us to live our values of integrity and care, I think, that have been like, okay, well, right, we can't, like the previous version of ourselves, like you said earlier, it wasn't our business. This is such it feels like it's just so new and it can feel really uncomfortable asking questions and saying, you know, sorry, we can't go, or sorry, you can't come, like these kinds of things that are really real.
Yeah, I think, you know, if I, you know, rewind and go back, when I first got the vaccine in end of February, early March, I wasn't thinking about it we weren't pregnant at that point. So I wasn't even thinking about it in terms of parenthood. The way I thought about it was, I'm taking one for the team. I'm healthy. My immune system's, you know, doing great. I'm on the front line. I'm at school every day with children. I can be one of the people who takes it for the team, right? To help get herd immunity or whatever. And that was my thoughts. That was it. There was no, you know, let me take it so that I don't get this person. It was just, I'm taking it for the team. X amount of us got to get it so we can try to get herd immunity. I'm in tip-top shape. I'll do it. That has since transitioned now from like, oh, thank goodness I did that. And now, okay, I got the booster. I got the booster for our safety, right? Now it is more personal, individual thought process, more so than it is my larger community. Let me do it for all the people who don't want to do it. Now it's like, okay, now I'm doing it because I got to protect my family. And then it's like, I'm going to have conversations with people I'm closest to around like what's underneath why you're choosing not to do it. And without judgment, I think it's easy, especially right now, like that, you know, all of our quote unquote normal lives have kind of been slowed down because of this pandemic. And a lot of people believe like if everyone just gets vaccinated, we can go back to the way things used to be. But I think going back to the way things used to be also isn't the answer. And so it's been interesting to have conversations with family and friends around, you know, who's getting it, who's not, and what their reasoning is, and to stay in the conversation, which is what we talk about often when we talk about race. It's very easy, you know, for an example, when someone's like, well, I don't know what's in the vaccine. And I'm like, don't you smoke cigarettes? Like, do you know what's in a cigarette? Like, that's, you know, that's in my head. That's my insight, as we call it, inside thoughts, you know, because if I just came with that judgment, that shuts the conversation down versus digging deeper into what do you think is in it? Like, and getting a clearer understanding and then doing research with them and helping and not sticking to, well, I told you what I think. You tell me what you think. We don't agree. Let's move past.
Agree to disagree. Right.
Right. I've had it with some family members 4 or 5 conversations before they finally were like, okay, I'm going to go get the vaccine.
Over the course of 4 months.
Yeah, of months.
You know, 4 or 5 months. Like these are, when we say, you know, living in alignment, it goes on both sides. You know, it's like staying at the table, caring enough and respecting each other enough and the people that we're talking with enough to truly deeply listen to their why, and also really ask questions instead of like come at it with some judgment, because there's so much judgment right now. And I think that we've talked about this, like cancel culture. There's so much, you know, of people being like, well, if you're not vaccinated, no, or I don't want to talk to you, or this or that. And like, it becomes like an elephant in the closet if we're just not going to talk about this. If we agree to disagree, so now this is the new way, right? And I think something that has really pushed our consciousness in this space is our awareness of history and like people's reasoning for not trusting the medical industry, especially people of color, they run really deep. So tell me about what you've learned, or what you would say we've learned, because it is really complex, and it's caused us to stay at the table longer and to really have more compassion and empathy as we're in these conversations, I think.
Yeah, I think one of the things I've learned is how people have access to information differs across communities. You know, some communities are specifically like, I'm taking it all from scientists. And that's a preference, right? Like you can choose to just take it straight from the scientists and be like, that's what the scientist said, so that's what I'm going to do. That's how some people get information. Some people get information, in my family in particular, through stories, right? So it's not, oh, I'm listening to what Dr. Fauci said or whatever other scientists. I know this personal experience of someone who got sick when they took it, and that made me, they're like my neighbor, you know, that made me scared. Or flip side of that, which has helped some of my community get the vaccine, is I know someone who actually died because they weren't vaccinated, right? So I think it just depends. What I've learned is how people get information really, really matters. And there's not a universal way, and I don't think there should be. There's not a universal way of everyone should get the information this way and believe it. But I think we do have to think more critically about, if we know certain people get it from their news and from what the science says and they're reading and they're doing their own research, that's a percentage. And so we should target that percentage. But we should also target the percentage of folks who are like, I want real life. I want to talk to my neighbor about it. I want to talk to my distant cousin. I want to talk to the nurse at the hospital that I see as a truthful ally. I want to whatever, right? I think we also have to see that as important ways to get information to communities. And I think sometimes we simply stop at the way that works for white society. And it's not to say that the way that works for white society is a scientist way, but I think that's the way that we typically stop. And we're like, oh, if you didn't get it that way, kind of good luck, right? Or you're in the wrong, or you need to go do your research or whatever. And I think people receive information so differently, especially across difference, that we have to, as a society, do better at making sure we're getting information. And I think some communities have, like I know in Los Angeles, there was like a caravan that went around to the communities. They would find zip codes who like majority of people weren't vaccinated, and then they would go around. You could then get the vaccine on the van. Like we need more resources to support community efforts like that if we're really talking about making sure everyone is safe and making sure everyone has what they need. And that includes information.
Yes. Yeah. And it's kind of that individualism versus collectivism.
Yeah.
Like cultural value of like how we receive information, what we learn to trust in terms of information. And then you do have a lot of misinformation out there. And I think it is really complex and challenging because there are a lot of conspiracy theories that are like leading people down a path of misinformation. And so it's like, how do we withhold judgment, but also hear something that doesn't align with our values or align with what we believe to be true in this age of like, conspiracy theories and YouTube's getting shared and things being kind of packaged as factual, but not. And like, there's so many different ways that people are forming opinions and deep beliefs about this vaccine that it makes the conversation all the more challenging. And I think what has helped us has been our commitment to listening and like really truly staying at the table and not giving up because it's been a week or two and you're still being stubborn. Like we've learned a lot about really truly hearing, even if we might have a reaction that's like, whoo, okay, just breathe through this conversation and get through it, and then figure out how we support this person with love and care, because we truly do want the best for our community, our family and friends. And how do we help hold up the mirror for people to understand for themselves, if that makes sense.
Right. Not because you told me to.
Yeah.
But it's because I got to make a conscious decision. And I think that's a part of, again, our value, right? Of like, I want to respect whatever thought process you have gone through to make your decision, that is your truthful, thought process. And if it is open for a dialogue, that we can have it.
Yeah.
Right. Because I care that much about you, because I respect you that much. Right. And I think what I'm seeing a lot in our society is those moments of listening to each other. And I'll say even not just in like broader society, but even in our like network, right? Even in people within our reach, from my school to my family to our neighborhood. Like what I'm learning is when there isn't time given to listen to people's experience, whether it be rooted in fear or fact or conspiracy or whatever,
right,
then you can't change anything, right? If it's just like, oh, you sound, I can't believe you even said that. Then it's like, well, you can still have that inner thought, inside thought, but then stay in the conversation for the greater good. If what matters to you is the greater good, then you figure out a way to stick in it.
Yeah.
Unless it's causing you some type of physical or emotional harm.
Yeah.
Then I, of course, take the space you need. But I think it's easier to just kind of call a person cuckoo or, say negative things about their decision making than it is to stay in the, as Brene Brown would say, arena, and really figure out what's causing you to have those thoughts or to think that, or and again, without judgment. So it's not to say, let me go back and forth with you and be like, well, that's just not factual.
Right.
Because like you think it is. And so then me telling you something's not factual
Right.
just again is an insult to you.
Yeah.
Right. So figuring out, asking like, oh, I hadn't read that. Can you share that
Right.
information with me? And often, it'll end up being like, well, I read it as a meme, or it was my cousin told me, or, oh, okay, well, I'll send, let's read this little blurb here together that I actually read from, X person or whatever. I think it then allows for some breathing space versus this like tightening, tense, because I want it to be that way, which is, if anybody's ever been, a new student on the first day of school, it's a scary world to be in, right? And you have all these thoughts around like, no one's gonna like me, and I'm not gonna make any friends, and I miss my old stuff. I want things to go back this way, until someone says, hi, my name is Rachel. What's your name? Right? And then you can breathe a little bit.
Yeah.
And then someone else says like, oh, I can show you how to do that. And then you breathe a little bit.
Right.
But if people just shut each other down immediately, there's no room for the connection, for growth, for breathing.
Yeah.
It's all just hit after hit.
Right. Because we've had, and you learn sometimes the power of having a little bit of time and space, like coming back to the table. Like I can recall a couple conversations where we've had multiple conversations with family members where, the first one or two conversations were like, yeah, well, cool, I'm still not getting the vaccine. That's how it ended. And then we would come back and say like, would you be open to talking about it again? Would you be open to hearing, like just the act of asking like, hey, would you be open to hearing something different this time? Like we've had to get creative. Some conversations we've talked about herd immunity. Other conversations we've talked about the actual science and shared different tweets, like it just is a different getting creative and thinking outside the box has pushed us to think about like it's all in service of our family that we're doing this.
Yeah. And I'll be honest, in service of our family, there's also been a clear, I don't think of too many things in like either this or this, but in this particular case, especially as it's so much information still being developed, so much understanding about this virus is still being understood, the safest thing we can do for our child is make sure we're putting her around people who are vaccinated. Like that's the clearest data point so in some conversations with in every conversation, whether it be with family or friends, it's been like, of course you can come meet her as long as you're vaccinated.
Yeah.
And like, I am not a confrontational person. I'm also a pretty stubborn person. So I understand stubbornness pretty well. But I think outside of myself, our child doesn't get to speak up for herself yet. It is our job to protect her with as much information as we have. And the information we have right now suggests the way we should be doing that is by making sure we're staying safe and getting vaccinated, and anybody that's around us is getting vaccinated.
Yeah.
And so in some conversations, it has been that. We love you. No love lost.
Yeah.
You just can't come to the house. You just can't come visit, the child. You just, whatever the case may be.
And I'd have to say, babe, I've been so inspired and in awe by your ability to, without blinking, be that direct with people. That's like neither of us are confrontational people. Neither of us like lean into conflict in that way. We're such social people and relational people that we want to make sure that people's needs are met. But I've been so like, whoa, I'm so moved by your just conviction. And it's like, it's come very quickly in moments where I'm like, oh, dang, I didn't even know we were going there, but she just put the line in the sand that firmly, and people respond to it, and it makes me feel really, I guess, like honored to be your partner, to see that, to witness that, and also like proud to be your partner, proud. I get to witness how much you already love our baby so hard, And
Yeah.
I'm getting a little emotional thinking about
that was pretty
my
nice.
eyes
That was
are
really
tearing
sweet.
up. Like it's been a blessing because I'm like, hormonal, pregnant, whether I'm hangry or like I am not as quick to think on my feet as you are in those moments, but you're just like, no question. Like your compass is so great as long as you're vaccinated. Cool. We'll see you if you're vaccinated. Like it's been really inspiring, because this is what our doctor recommended, and this is what all the studies have said about newborns, and in general, people who are around newborns should have up-to-date vaccinated, all that stuff. But that's what we choose. These are our choices as a family, to follow our doctor's recommendations. And so the way that you've really protected our family and stood up for our values, and it hasn't been easy. Like, I know that it's caught people off guard.
Yeah, because
and you still push forward,
It makes me, this is connected in some interesting way, but what it makes me think of is the James Baldwin quote where he says, if we can disagree and still love each other, unless your disagreement is rooted in my oppression and denial of my humanity and right to exist. And I think the power of that is, I think, what drives me. Like, we can disagree unless it's rooted in the safety of my child, right? Like right now, it's rooted in the safety of my child. So it's very clear to me that our disagreement stays there. Like, it has to just stay as though we see things differently. I don't love you any less, but we don't move past that because it is currently rooted in the safety of our child, right?
Yeah.
And so I think in the same way that it would be if it's rooted in the denial of my humanity, then like we're not just going to move past that and be like, okay, let's just agree to disagree.
Yeah.
You don't see me as human. No, right? Like in this case, we can't just agree to disagree when it's rooted in the safety for our child until something else suggests that it's not. Once something else suggests it's not,
right.
Cool.
Right.
But for right now,
yeah. And we're talking specifically about people coming to our house and staying with us. These are bringing people into the most safest, most sacred, safe spaces that we could build for our child. And so,
right, we can't be out in the grocery store being like, excuse me, please don't move your cart past me unless I can see your vaccination card because my wife is pregnant. Like, okay, right? Like, I mean, if we could, we probably would, but we can't, right?
Yeah,
so
this is what we can
But what we
protect.
can protect is our household and our home and
our
who comes to visit. Because having a baby is a beautiful love thing, right? Like people, it is one of the most beautiful, amazing opportunities is to see the way humanity shows up when they find out another life is coming into the world. Right. It's been really a beautiful honor to see in both of our circles how people have shown up. And one of them is people want to come visit, and we're social people. So I think it is never, there's no like, no, please don't come visit us ever.
Yeah.
And so this has been a new muscle that we're building as we're growing and developing our family. So
yeah, I think that's the last thing that we've learned about protecting our family unit in this season has been like really taking the intentional time while we have it, because we know time is a real gift right now.
Oh, yeah.
Time and sleep is having these real conversations about like, okay, how do we could rush into this journey and we could say, yeah, come visit. Yeah, you can stay with us and all that. Like a lot of people have that experience. And then you hear on the other side of that experience, some like, oh man, I wish I would have had a couple weeks, just me and my partner, so we could build our unit together. Or you know what, I thought it would be cool having all these people staying with me, but it actually caused more stress, and that energy was really anxious in my house. So we've been really listening to the advice people have given us, and I think one of the clear things that we're really clear on is caring for our family unit first and taking the time and space to build our family unit is going to be really important to us. So we've had to say like, yeah, that's so sweet. You want to come visit like right after she's born. Cool. We're not going to have visitors until X date because we love you, and we are so honored and touched by how much love our family and friends want to pour into our baby, y'all. Like we can't even, our hearts are overflowing with how much love is coming at us. And it's like a moment for us to be like, yeah, and that love can still be there 4 weeks from, or 2 weeks from, you know?
Because you don't get the opportunity back to build those first bricks for your foundation, right? Or that you don't get to pour it again. However you pour it is how you pour it.
Those formative moments, even if we're sleep deprived and even if we're like on fumes and everything is, even then we want to experience that together,
right? Yeah, not being on fumes or sleep deprived because it's like another energy in the house besides ours and the babies. Yeah. So, I mean, that's just the beginning part of this series that we're about to be in with these episodes around becoming parents. But I think the takeaway from this one truly is like understanding our values and getting aligned there, and then really thinking about how we've grown and are changing as we're thinking about the life that we're bringing into this world, and how more direct that's making us, and how more clear that's making us.
Yeah.
Which is a true blessing and a gift.
Yeah. And these values they show up everywhere we go, personally, professionally, all the spaces. They're really sharpening in every way. And so in our next episode 14, we're going to talk about even more layers of what preparing for parenthood as an interracial couple has taught us. We're going to get even more personal. We're going to share some other connections. And it's going to be good, y'all. We're excited for this conversation and for this continued journey together.
Yes. And we want to hear from you. Please share your family values with us.
Yes.
If you are a parent out there and you're like, oh, I remember those first 4 weeks, share any of that insight with us as well. Again, we aren't, obviously going to just listen to everything that everyone shares, but it's just nice to have information and to utilize what we need and to handle it with care. So we appreciate each of you for listening and sharing and tuning in.
Yes. And if you don't if you don't have clearly articulated family values or even your own individual values, then we invite you to join us on this journey and start the conversation with someone you care about and love and someone who you would consider family. If you happen to be raising a child with someone else, tell us what that has been like for you. If you haven't made them explicit, what could be possible if you do make them explicit?
Mm-hmm. And if you're raising a child with someone across racial difference and racial lines, cultural lines, we definitely want to hear more about that and what that experience is like in terms of in your sacred space, but also out in society.
Yes. And what have you learned about setting limits in service of those values? Anybody across race, across culture, across all the different layers of why limits are so important. So, we're excited. We'll put the questions in the show notes, and we can't wait to hear from y'all.
All right, y'all. Until next time, sending you love and light.
Thanks for joining us today, y'all. We'd love to stay connected on Instagram and Facebook, so you can find us at 2 Wives and a Spark, all spelled out.
If you enjoyed today's episode, share it with a friend so we can keep the sparks of connection going. If you want access to our episodes as soon as they drop, click that subscribe button. Every rating and review helps others find us, so thank you in advance for letting us know what you think.
And special shout out to Journey Girl Magic Productions.
I'm Leah.
And I'm Rachel.
Thank you for listening to 2 Wives and a Spark.